Heavier than air. The 17th and 18th centuries. Italian inventor Tito Livio Baratini, invited by the Polish king W. Lady Law IV to his court in Warsaw, built a model aircraft with four fixed glider wings in 1647. Described as four pairs of wings attached to an elaborate dragon, it was said to have successfully lifted a cat in 1648, but not Baratini himself. He promised that only the most minor injuries would result from landing the craft. His Dragon Volant is considered the most elaborate and sophisticated aeroplane to be built before the 19th century. The first published paper on aviation was Sketch of a Machine for Flying in the Air by Emmanuel Swedenborg, published in 1716. This flying machine consisted of a light frame covered with strong canvas and provided with two large oars or wings moving on a horizontal axis, arranged so that the upstroke met with no resistance while the downstroke provided lifting power. Swedenborg knew that the machine would not fly, but suggested it as a start and was confident that the problem would be solved. He wrote, "It seems easier to talk of such a machine than to put it into actuality, for it requires greater force and less weight than exists in a human body." The science of mechanics might perhaps suggest a means, namely a strong spiral spring. If these advantages and requisites are observed, perhaps in time to come one might know how better to utilize our sketch and cause some additions to be made so as to accomplish that which we can only suggest. Yet there are sufficient proofs and examples from nature that such flights can take place without danger, although when the first trials are made you may have to pay for the experience and not mind an arm or leg. Swedenborg would prove prescient in his observation that a method of powering of an aircraft was one of the critical problems to be overcome. The 19th century, balloon jumping replaced tower jumping, also demonstrating with typically fatal results that manpower and flapping wings were useless in achieving flight. At the same time, scientific study of heavier than air flight began in earnest. In 1837, a French mathematician and Brigadier General Isidore Didion stated, "Aviation will be successful only if one finds an engine whose ratio with the weight of the device to be supported will be larger than current steam machines, or the strength developed by humans or most of the animals." Sir George Cayley and the first modern aircraft. Sir George Cayley was first called the father of the aeroplane in 1846. During the last years of the previous century, he had begun the first rigorous study of the physics of flight and would later design the first modern, heavier than aircraft. Among his many achievements, his most important contributions to aeronautics include clarifying our ideas and laying down the principles of heavier than air flight, reaching a scientific understanding of the principles of bird flight, conducting scientific aerodynamic experiments demonstrating drag and streamlining movement of the center of pressure and increase in lift from curving the wing surface. Actually, the scientists conduct a scientific aerodynamic experiments demonstrating drag and streamlines of the wing structure he constructed, and he saw the movement of the center of pressure, the COP of the wing, and increase in lift from curving the wing surface. And he done all these designs of wing to increase the lift by means of doing the aerodynamic experiments. Defining the modern airplane configuration comprising a fixed wing, fuselage and tail assembly. Demonstration of manned gliding flight, setting out the principles of power to weight ratio in sustaining flight. Cayley's first innovation was to study the basic science of lift by adapting the whirling arm test rig for use in aircraft research and using simple aerodynamic models on the arm rather than attempting to fly a model of a complete design. In 1799, he set down the concept of the modern aeroplane as a fixed wing flying machine with separate systems for lift, propulsion, and control. In 1799, he set down the concept. The scientist set a concept for the modern airplane as a fixed wing flying machine with separate systems for lift, propulsion, and control. In 1804, Cayley constructed a model glider which was the first modern heavier than air flying machine, having the layout of a conventional modern aircraft with an inclined wing towards the front and adjustable tail at the back with both tail plane and fin. A movable weight allowed adjustment of the model's center of gravity. The picture shown is the governable parachute design of 1852. In 1809, goaded by the farcical antics of his contemporaries, he began the publication of a landmark three-part treatise titled On Aerial Navigation. On aerial navigation 1809 to 1810. In it, he wrote the first scientific statement of the problem. The whole problem is confined within these limits. To make a surface support a given weight by the application of power to the resistance of air. He identified the four vector forces that influence an aircraft: thrust, lift, drag, and weight. Distinguished stability and control in his designs. He also identified and described the importance of the cambered aerofoil, dihedral diagonal bracing, and drag reduction, and contributed to the understanding and design of ornithopters and parachutes. In 1848, he had progressed far enough to construct a glider in the form of a triplane, large and safe enough to carry a child. A local boy was chosen, but his name is not known. The scientist in 1848 constructed a triplane safe enough to carry a child. A child is carried, but his name is unknown. He went on to publish in 1852 the design for a full-size manned glider or governable parachute to be launched from a balloon, and then to construct a version capable of launching from the top of a hill, which carried the first adult aviator across Brampton Dale in 1853. First adult aviator was carried by a manned glider, full-size manned glider or governable parachute. It is called manned glider or governable parachute to be launched from a balloon and then to construct a version capable of launching from the top of a hill. Minor inventions included the rubber-powered motor, which provided a reliable power source for research models. By 1808, he had even reinvented the wheel, devising the tension-spoked wheel in which all compression loads are carried by the rim, allowing a lightweight undercarriage. The age of steam. Directly drawing from the Cayley's work, Henson's 1842 design for an aerial steam carriage broke new ground. Although only a design, it was the first in history for a propeller-driven fixed-wing aircraft. 1866 saw the founding of the Aeronautical Society of Great Britain, and 2 years later, the world's first aeronautical exhibition was held at the Crystal Palace, London, where John Stringfellow was awarded a £100 prize for a steam engine with the best power to weight ratio. In 1848, Stringfellow achieved the first powered flight using an unmanned 10 feet wingspan steam powered monoplane built in a disused lace factory in Chad, Somerset, employing two contra rotating propellers. On the first attempt, made indoors, the machine flew 10 feet before becoming destabilized, damaging the craft. The second attempt was more successful, the machine leaving a guide wire to fly freely, achieving some 30 yards of straight and level powered flight. Francis Herbert Wenham presented the first paper to the newly formed Aeronautical Society, later the Royal Aeronautical Society. On aerial locomotion, he advanced Cayley's work on cambered wings, making important findings. To test his ideas from 1858, he had constructed several gliders, both manned and unmanned. and with up to 5 stacked wings. He realized that long, thin wings are better than bat like ones because they have more leading edge for their area. Today, this relationship is known as the aspect ratio of a wing. The later part of the 19th century became a period of intense study characterized by the gentleman scientists who represented most research efforts until the 20th century. Among them was the British scientist, philosopher, and inventor Matthew Piers Bolton, who studied lateral flight control and was the first to patent an aileron control system in 1868. In 1871, Wenham and Browning made the first wind tunnel. The picture shown is the Felix Du Temple's 1874 monoplane. Meanwhile, the British advances had galvanized French researchers. In 1857, Felix Du Temple proposed a monoplane with a tailplane and retractable undercarriage. Developing his ideas with a model powered first by clockwork and later by steam, he eventually achieved a short hop with a full-size manned craft in 1874. It achieved liftoff under its own power after launching from a ramp, glided for a short time, and returned safely to the ground, making it the first successful powered glide in history. In 1865, Louis Pierre Moylad published an influential book, The Empire of the Air, El, El Empire de l'Air. The picture shown is Jean-Marie Le Bris and his flying machine Albatros II, 1868. In 1856, Frenchman Jean-Marie Le Bris made the first flight higher than his point of departure by having his glider L'Albatros artificial pulled by a horse on a beach. He reportedly achieved a height of 100 meters over a distance of 200 meters. The picture is Plano 4 model aeroplane by Alphonse Spanor, 1871. Alphonse Spanor, a Frenchman, advanced the theory of wing contours and aerodynamics and constructed successful models of aeroplanes, helicopters, and ornithopters. In 1871, he flew the first aerodynamically stable fixed-wing aeroplane, a model monoplane he called the Plano 4, a distance of 40 meters, 130 feet. Penot's model incorporated several of Cayley's discoveries, including the use of a tail-winged header for inherent stability and rubber power. The Plano 4 also had longitudinal stability, being trimmed such that the tailplane was set at a smaller angle of incidence than the wings. An original and important contribution to the theory of aeronautics, Penot's later project for an amphibian aeroplane, although never built, incorporated other modern features. A tailless monoplane with a single vertical fin and twin tractor propellers, it also featured hinged rear elevator and rudder surfaces, retractable undercarriage, and a fully enclosed instrumented cockpit. The picture shown is the aeroplane of Victor Tatin, 1879. Equally authoritative as a theorist was Penot's fellow countryman Victor Tatin. In 1879, he flew a model which, like Penot's project, was a monoplane with twin tractor propellers but also had a separate horizontal tail. It was powered by compressed air flown tethered to a pole. This was the first model to take off under its own power. In 1884, Alexandre Goupil published his work La Locomotion Aérienne, aerial locomotion, although the flying machine he later constructed failed to fly. The picture shown is the Clement Ader Aviation 3, 1897 photograph. In 1890, the French engineer Clement Ader completed the first of 3 steam-driven flying machines, the Yole. On October 9, 1890, Ader made an uncontrolled hop of around 50 meters, 165 feet. This was the first manned airplane to take off under its own power. His Avion 3 of 1897, notable only for having twin steam engines, failed to fly. Adair would later claim success and was not debunked until 1910 when the French army published its report on his attempt. The picture is Maxim's flying machine. Sir Hiram Maxim was an American engineer who had moved to England. He built his own whirling arm rig and wind tunnel and constructed a large machine with a wingspan of 105 feet 32 meter, a length of 145 feet 44 meter, fore and aft horizontal surfaces, and a crew of 3. Twin propellers were powered by 2 lightweight compound steam engines, each delivering 180 horsepower, 130 kilowatt. Overall weight was 8,000 pounds, 3,600 kilograms. It was intended as a test rig to investigate aerodynamic lift. Lacking flight controls, it ran on rails with a second set of rails above the wheels to restrain it. Completed in 1894. On its tail run, it broke from the rail, became airborne for about 200 yards at 2 to 3 feet of altitude, and was badly damaged upon falling back to the ground. It was subsequently repaired, but Maxim abandoned his experiment shortly afterwards.